Lorene, what are you doing? Oh,
I'm I've knitted a cheese cutter, you know, the newsboy style hat. It's got a peak. I can't show you. It's a tweedy hat.
a Tweety.
Um, Cap. Yeah, but I've done a knitted version.
So who we got
Yeah,
here?
Do
when
do
I
do 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 do.
What does that ominous do mean, Story Doll?
Oh, that's not ominous.
It's a mood.
That's jovial. That's jovial.
Oh, it's jovial? Okay.
Yeah.
Do. All right,
Let's
we're gonna work
see.
on some joviality today. Really? Oh, look at you. You got a shirt on and everything.
Yeah, no beard. Sorry for those who may be disappointed in that. And yeah,
Oh,
man, it feels good in the summer.
Mel, hi. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting going. What airship is this, James? 807, right?
Yeah, it is 8:07. Yeah, let's kick it off. Sorry, I'm running a little bit tardy. Let's let's
Okay, have
let's
you
get it
got all the
flying.
things, all the dials
We
clicked?
everything it looks like everything's recording.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks for wait. Yeah, thanks for asking. Oh, that hurt. Okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah, with lights, camera, action. Yeah, there's just one more thing.
And you
Sorry.
made me a co-host.
Start you should be there. Start recording. I'm at 25 frames per second, which should fix the problem. We're ready to go. Yep.
I don't know if I'm a co-host yet, though. It says leave meeting and okay. So did I
Okay, I'll
agree with
withdraw your
already?
permissions and then I'll give them to you again, but it's
Okay, yeah, let me
definitely
see it again. I might have missed that. There you go. There you go. Okay, so I'm already okay, good. Nice. All right. Hello, welcome everyone to Airship 807. This is a Wednesday night flight. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about what's going on in the field after the eclipse and between this 420 Uranus Jupiter conjunction. So here we go. Let's take off on this flight. Welcome aboard.
hello, Renee. Good to see everybody. You still eclipsing, huh? You still feeling the eclipse? Is that
Oh
what's
yeah,
going
I'm
on?
still arcing. This is an arc.
Yeah.
It's a bend. It's
Yeah.
flex.
Flex?
It's a flex. Yeah, you're flexing. You're kind of flexing your what you brought to the party up until this point, what you've accumulated these last 4 years. And since 2017, really, I think that was a big shift for everybody coming
Yeah.
online. Whether we call it the Great Awakening, a Kundalini awakening, a spiritual awakening, whatever the awakening was, it came through in all different ways. And that's so beautiful that we all have all these different experiences. Yet we're here together, gathered, and what a great crew. Thanks everybody for being here. Real excited.
Enjoy the show is a pretty big mantra that's been around since 2017 or so. And it was probably one of the bigger tells, I think, that was out there. You could probably give credit to QAnon for kind of coining that phrase, enjoy the show. It was a phrase that was kicked off on 4chan. This was the idea that President Trump was elected by a secret underground society of John F. Kennedy loyalists who, when John F. Kennedy was shot, these people went underground and waited through five presidential terms for the right moment to strike back and find the underground pedophile deep state people that are pulling the strings, and that Donald Trump, it would be the Cyrus, not Osiris, but the Cyrus, the Khan who would liberate us all. And it was a such a powerful time because I was watching the fervor of just psychonauts, astronauts in the psychic space exploring new territory. And the new territory has been sloppily revealing. I mean this in a good way. It's because the internet's so new. We've had the opportunity to see a lot of things that are the ones who came before us, the ones from the long, long ago, our parents and grandparents and our ancestors weren't able to see the same kinds of things. Although you could argue in the 19th century and of course in the 18th century, it was even sloppier and you could see so much more. And so there seems to be a collapse. The facade seems to constantly be collapsing because a new epoch comes along and you sort of have to tear down the old furniture and rebuild new ones. And we saw this with our Confederate heroes, Nathan Bedford Forrest, a Confederate hero, long dubbed a racist by anyone who's been just taught history. But if you were to look up Nathan Bedford Forrest right now, with two R's, Run Forrest Run, you would find on Wikipedia that this was the first man to ever speak at the NAACP, the first white speaker there, invited to speak to their group. But history's told you this completely different tale, and the South and the Confederacy is part of this. James True, your humble host, or humble pilot, I should say. Welcome to Wednesday Night Flight. Grew up in the South, and there was a place called the Confederama in Ringgold, Georgia, which was just over the line. Where I came from is the corner of Georgia and Tennessee and North Carolina, all at the same point. And in there is Fort Oglethorpe, the fort that was famous in the Civil War. An entire breed of Indians called the Chickamauga were stamped out and instead renamed into this battle. The Battle of Chickamauga is actually the battle of the territory of the Chickamauga. It's the Chickamauga. These guys are fucking intense. And if we are going to do anything here, regardless of if we say we're South or North, we are going to have to contend with the Chickamauga. And so forts and ramparts were built, giant supply lines from the Tennessee River to stagecoach artillery lines. As we just learned in episode 806, we learned about the Underground Railroad of the Associated Press forming from Montgomery, passing right through the Chickamauga territory to reach the vital hub of Virginia, and able to transmit data across enemy lines. And that data would be war data, Rothschild-esque, how to profit on things, what is the future before people know what the future actually is. Fortune telling and technology are really the same thing. And only when we look in the past do we fully understand that the Svengali of media itself is fully about, I will hoard this information and then spoon feed it to you after I've, processed it in whatever way necessary. And we've learned that if propaganda is going to get to you, it's going to have to. It's not a function of some kinds of propaganda, that it wouldn't matter whose side, even your own propaganda, that the only way that your propaganda is going to meet the destination is if it has enough gas to get there. And the whole new Ethernet economy is showing us that, how it works now, which is fascinating. Each of us have the ability to become our own bank. And we know that when we are our own bank, if we want to send money to Australia, there's going to be a certain gas fee required to send that money from here to there. And that one of the beautiful things that Bitcoin's showing you is how propaganda works too. Propaganda propagates, and it propagates because a gate is a circuit, and the circuit requires fuel, and that fuel builds up in a capacitor and it's sent. And so the propaganda that we see isn't even a bad word. In fact, for us to call it a bad word, we're actually living in a fantasy where there's such a thing as non-propaganda. And I think really ultimately, this is at the heart of why we don't bunk things. We believe that there is a thing called non-propaganda. That there is an objective form of data that is completely statistically devoid and neutered of all intentions or conspiracy. And that place we insist exists, even though none of us have actually seen it, but we vote for it. We send our children to war because we think it's there. And if we survive enough battles, and if we do enough things and commit enough foolish acts of trusting something too much, we get broken in the perfect way where we're able to see our own blood, and we're able to process that we are a special kind of vegetable. And this kind of fermentation of lying is a special treat that only some of us really get to even understand the flavor of this world. And you could so easily crawl into a number of voices that are going to tell you things like there's no lies in nature, or that there is a fact-based safety net that you can find, and if you just follow this voice, or reason with yourself, or take this pill, even you will get there. I don't have a solution. I have a journey in a fire, and we gather around it, and we're like, hey, did you see that weird frog on the trail? And it's like, yeah, I did. That was weird. Yeah, it's right. I have no idea what it means either, but I saw it. It was weird. Yeah, did you lick it? Oh, I know. Did you licked it? Yeah, I totally licked it. It's a bad idea. I do not recommend licking that frog. But yeah, I licked it, and then I saw a color I didn't know existed. Yeah, Kafinkle. It's right there. It's Kafinkle. It's a beautiful hue. And we if we can slip the bounds of the labels of this idea of non-play and play, we really find that sanity and insanity are kind of just the similar kind of bubble that the more that I feel okay, the more people around me have to dismiss me, the more comfortable I become with who I am. And we're watching so much is happening right now, and none of it is important. That sounds so weird to say, but whether or not you get it is only going to profoundly hurt you. And it's not really, it doesn't really matter what anyone else. This is the anti-Zionism. And you get here when you let go, because you understand the folly that you're surrounded by, and that people are doing this not because they're lost. They're doing this because if you can say you're lost, the forest gets a lot more exciting. You you get to kind of enter into this state of just, oh my God, oh my God, and you become desperate, and you feel alive, and you have experiences that you wouldn't have at home, right? And you if you've ever been lost, I know all of you, I hope to goodness you've had that sense where you're like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die. I don't know where I am. How do I get back to civilization? Okay, I'm supposed to follow rivers at it, or whatever it is. Even if it's, I got lost in a haunted house. It was fucking terrifying. I was so afraid to. We entered the we entered the haunted house. This was a sanctioned haunted house. This was not a real. So if it was, because I don't know if it was real or not. This was a sanctioned. You pay money to come visit a haunted house. Just so we're clear on what kind of haunted house this was. This wasn't like a, yeah, old man Doug died over there. You should totally go in there. I didn't get lost in that, although that would be even scarier. Now, this was just like, hey, welcome to Lake Winnepesaukah. Do you want to take it to the haunted house? And I knew that something was wrong when everyone around me was like, yes, we want to go in the haunted house. And I was just like, fuck, why are we this is not, I don't like where this is going. And I get about 10 feet in the haunted house, and I'm like, I gotta go. I'm not ready to bust this cherry yet. I I believe in fear, and you guys want to go make out with it. Like you were like, let's go rub our cooties over. Let's show our genitals to fear itself. And I'm like, this is a horrible idea. And so I went backwards, which caused a lot of problems. And as a result of that, the exit of the haunted house is in a completely different location than the entrance. And I was left at Lake Winnepesaukah. The school that took me, decided that everyone who needed to go. And I just want to point out that it was my fear of fear that brought me actually living a real version of that. And so in a way I had a fear of it being fake. In a way I had a fear of it being something that was that was regimented, I wanted it to exist more raw in the wild. And so I never actually said I don't want to visit the haunted house. I said, no, I want to go to the haunted house where you feel abandoned. That's what I want to. If you guys want to go to a haunted house, I'm ready. To me, the scariest thing I could go through right now is being abandoned. That my own brother is going to get on a bus and go and leave me here, and no one will. My mom's just going to forget that she happened to have two kids. That's what's happening. And that's fate. And here I am trying to say, no, 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 I can't go, right? I can't go. And right in the kisser, right? I did not bring you here to tell you the story. I don't know how we ended up in this little corner of Lake Winnepesaukah, but yeah, good stuff. I've been reading a lot about the uh not just the Haudenosaunee, but I just keep guys, I'm kind of still blown away by this whole idea that like I wish I had more slides. I almost don't want to blow it because I want to just have more slides, but I'm just doing a lot of I'm not going to blow it. There's so much cool stuff going on with this American history, like this similarities between the Iroquois Confederacy and us. It's been really satisfying. I'm probably not going to have a show this week because I had an interview yesterday and an interview tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's podcast is about UFOs and young, or at least that's kind of a starting point. And it's with a guy that I've never done a show with before. It's called on I want to say On the Road, but I actually think it's excuse me, I think it's actually something slightly different than that. And I'm just looking it up here. It's End of Road, End of the Road podcast. This guy's practicing attorney, um, like way into psychology, and I'm really touched that he reached out to me. So I kind of have also sort of like put the American history stuff not really on the back burner, but it's just I want to be more prepared. So I've been reading that. Young's book on UFOs um, is interesting, and he said some things that that I've forgotten that he had said that I think I probably started saying, thinking that they were things I said, or it was just synchronicity. I don't know, but it's been really cool. It's nice to be challenged to always move around and try different stuff like that. So so yeah, I don't have a pitch tonight. I hope that's okay. That's why I had a hunch. I'll tell you this. I really had a hunch. The Iroquois Confederacy has actually I can tell you this. I think it's cool as fuck that a lot of the tribes are called snakes, and like Iroquois is just French for snakes. And Erie is actually a term for one who has a long tail. So like Lake Erie is an Indian word for the lake of tails. There's something about the men with tails were described as being there. And Columbus was accused of looking for the same thing. He was accused of like, hey, isn't there where are the people with tails? It's like, I found the cannibals, check. Cannibals, check. People with tails, where are they? I don't see them yet. But so a lot of the names that we have for Indian tribes are just like negative connotations in which we're referring to each other as snakes. So Iroquois and Sioux are two examples of that. It's not actually their name. You guys probably knew that, but um, I'm always getting profoundly disturbed by this that the Aztec uh, don't even know what to call the people that were at Teotihuacan. And they don't even know like they didn't even know. And there's a lot of things that we lose that we don't know what we're losing. Khan, for example, in the Olmec tradition, the snake went from Coatl and Khan. So the term Khan means snake, and that's a term meaning king. Most of Asia has this similarity to calling Khan king. Same with Baal. Baal is a very ubiquitous word for just Lord. So, I think we're losing a lot of our phonetics as we slip through history. And I think that one of the grandest, amazing things that's going to happen is that not just AI. I don't mean to attribute it to this, but as as we get as we refine our history more, we become more phonetically aware of what things sounded like. And when we start to uncover what things sounded like, I think we start to uncover a lot deeper understanding of what the psychology was of certain things. The Navajo who live in the desert, or at least now live in the desert, they they kicked their snakes out of their zoo 5 years ago. That they had a national zoo on their reservation, still open. People come from all over to visit this zoo. It has a beautiful window, a hole in this mountain, and you looks like a beautiful place. And 6 years ago, they were like, yeah, the snake exhibit is just not, people hate it. Like, well, why they hate it? It's like Navajo they don't want to look at a snake having sex. They don't want to look at a snake shedding. They don't want to look at a snake doing anything, eating anything. That by doing that, you become intoxicated. You become enchanted by this spirit. And the entire time all these people are calling each other snakes, they're referring to each other's tribes as, oh, they're a bunch of snakes. It's kind of like I think it's the equivalent to the N word. Like it's sort of like the lowest form of insulting each other back then. And it's what we just call them. There's actually a tribe called the Snake Indians, where this is even separate from the Sioux and the Iroquois. That's in, it's like I guess Utah or something, somewhere around there. But it's just, here's three Indians that we just said, these are the Snake Indians. And it's probably the same thing where you're asking the Huron, what are those people called? And the Huron goes, oh, those are fucking snakes. Those are Iroquois is actually a certain kind of snake. I forget. In French, it's a collection or some sort of thing of snakes. And as you what I've been percolating on, where I've been going with this, but I don't have anything traditional yet, is because I think maybe this could be proven. There's a myth. There's a So the Iroquois Confederacy, south of the Great Lakes, had five, later six nations, and these five nations, the Seneca on the west, were told by people that came before them, and there was a fort that was there before the Seneca were there, and these were giants. Seneca said these were much larger men, and they built these forts that are here. And the Cherokee have the same thing in Tennessee. There's these forts that that they lived in, but they say we didn't build this. The people came before us built this. They didn't necessarily call them giants, but they said we don't know. And then there's the legend of the Moon Eye people, which could have been taller. I don't know, like albino giants. I don't know. You really don't know. But learning to uncover this seems to be easier. If you saw how the Iroquois flag looks like the longhouse of the Capitol building last week, and that rang a bell to you, I think that that's the elixir to really just see through the truth of what America had to have been in order for it to end up in the place that it is now. Uncle Sam is a Meshican god of death. I've told you this before, but it's never hit me until I really started to think about Uncle Sam. It's Uncle Sam is a white, stark white bearded, white haired, red and white striped crazy man in a super tall gangster hat. And it's no different than fucking Geronimo. Geronimo has a gangster hat. And what's different about Uncle Sam is it's the oldest Indian. The oldest Indian, Mixcoatl, is this red and white striped thing, and it raises its own children to give their hearts. And, I won't repeat this because it's pretty fresh in my latest content, but if we really want to understand the true nature of this place, then we would need to be able to recognize the archetypes in the room in present. It's easy to see them in the past. It's easy to see, oh, well, this is how they used to worship this and they used to sacrifice this. And it doesn't take much to realize that the Purple Heart kind of makes sense in a world where we sacrifice our hearts, and this red and white striped Uncle Sam guy picks which people, and he calls them Eagle Warriors, and and they go somewhere and they give their heart. They sacrifice their heart. They never win. They're not supposed to win. They're supposed to be sacrificed. And the thank you for your service is Mixcoatl. We don't know what these people were called. But wouldn't it be a fucking trip? Is it if you could go back there and listen to them at Templo Mayor when they're sending people up? What if they were saying, thank you for your service? Like, what if the same fucking phonetic words of thank you for your service were still coming out, but they were phonetically just tied to the space between the notes, right? Is different because they're tied to different phonetic meanings of things. And so you end up noticing that there's a digitized truth to all language that we've only haven't been able to see simply because we cannot keep track of that oral tradition for that long. Do you realize how uniquely impossible it is to store an oral tradition over a written one? We have something called the Talmud. Most people think that's the oldest written Jewish record in the world, and because it's the oldest Jewish record, it must be a Jewish book that was written, and it's not. It's actually an oral tradition. It's oral, handed down verbally, and people started to notice we can't keep up with this stuff. We got to find a way to write it down, and people instantly, the Jews got mad. You can't write that down. It's sacrilegious. You're going to ruin it. You're going to ruin all of, that's what they said. You're going to ruin all of these teachings simply by writing them down. This is the first time I've seen, not that it isn't there a lot, because I don't know shit. It's the first time I noticed historically, 2,000 years ago, someone noticed that there's a phonetic language that's very different than a literal written language. The written language is collapsed. The wave is collapsed. You're forced to read the words that come through. But if you are in an oral tradition, you feel the emotion of Paul Bunyan. You feel the emotion of the three hunters in the sky chasing Taurus, the constellation. That the Orion hunters are there endlessly chasing this thing, and that the oral tradition would be the thing that holds the meaning, but it would be, it's not audio. It's not, it's something more. My audiobook would only be translatable if you had the phonetic flavoring of this world right now. Do you see what I mean? Like if you didn't have that, it's not going to work. Shakespeare is not a perfect example of this because you can get into Shakespeare, but it's sort of like that. You you Shakespeare is actually, I'm not making that up. It's actually really funny to read, but only after you've in inserted the proper posture. And then you start to notice, so that was funny as fuck. What he did, that was funny. And you, then it becomes easy. You're sort of able to tap in. And it could be that that's why Shakespeare is why it is. Their poetry, mythology seem to have, lyrics seem to have a better a better way of encapsulating these kind of feelings. Music, obviously, I think would trump these all, right? That when we are fully realized, we're probably singing all the time, you know, that everything's just a musical. It might sound annoying, but it probably isn't if you're in the vibe. If you're not in the vibe, then the musical's got to sound really annoying. But if you're in that space, it's probably just about right, you know? Like it really does satisfy that timbre, you know? Hey, my coffee's ready. I'm gonna, can someone,
To back up your point, it seems like an important part of my ability to read. I think I spend a lot of time in, well, I mean, all over, but a bulk of my reading currently is in the 19th century. And so, but it seems like it really improves my ability to digest when I'm reading, like when I spend time with an author, like I think James and I share an affinity for William James, for example. He has a certain approach to his prose, very verbose and very technical, but you get to know the man. And also, this might sound obvious and idiotic to say, but I only read as fast as I can read aloud. So I read aloud silently in my head, I guess, in a sense, to where so I'm not a fast reader, but it does, I feel like it does afford afford me a level of compassion that at least in my own mind, I feel like it gives the written word, in a sense, because I do think especially with written words, they almost become dense with import as opposed to elucidating with tone. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with that, because again, James has mentioned there's something mysterious about looking through glass, or imagining, like, maybe there was a time where we couldn't see through water, that was something we trained to do. But I don't think it's not a problem for myself, at least, who loves the written word, that it does become dense with import, or the words do. But I was just trying to think about how they're different than the spoken word, I guess, in a sense. And most of my best attempt at it to shoot from the hip, but so with the written word, it gives me so many, denotations, and connotatively, when you're reading words, if you understand how they were used at a particular time, you end up with double entendres and stuff, which, again, all of that is possible with the spoken word as well, especially once you know somebody. But there's so much more verity with the spoken word. Just when you're James, for a long time, it took me a while to catch up with what he was actually saying, would say he doesn't listen to the words at all in a dojo situation. He's following the vibe and the what energies the people are serving, more off what their body's issuance than the words they're choosing, their intellectual choices. And I think
yeah,
that kind of,
I'd say we all do that anyway. And we just utilize the excuse of words to justify what we smelled, you know, what we what we pulled out of the field. So we'll say, yeah, but you said this and you said that. And you think about this is gets me all the time, but you think about, I don't mean arguing even in a combative way, but just think about some friends that I don't really hang out with anymore since the first eclipse. Not because of the eclipse, but just the shifting of consciousness, and you have kind of arguments in your head with these people where you can hear their side and they're expressing it to you and you're expressing your side to them, and you really do start to realize how many things neither of you can prove. And this to me is where I've lost the battle and surrendered to, there's no way that I'm ever going to lie to myself about using logic to joust with someone ever again. Because I learned in debate in high school, I learned really quick. This has nothing to do with logic at all. Like nothing at all to do with it. This is who can get the crowd into a fervor, which really comes down to who can dramatically overextend the moral superiority of an argument that's not even there to begin with. And no one is there arguing over why. Like, to me, the real debate would be, can you do both? Can you do both instantly? Because then we start to get closer to what I see as reality, but I can't prove to anyone. My friend who worked in the hospital that we don't talk to each other because of the way that the COVID stuff went down. It's not a grudge, by the way. It's just neither of us are going to feel comfortable reaching out to each other. And I would imagine that when he looks back, he's like, yeah, poor James, conspiracy theorist, doesn't understand. Or sometimes I put in his mind that he thinks, well, James only thinks this way because he's a writer and he profits from it. And when I hear that, I even though he doesn't say this, I listen to that argument, and I realize this is coming from a friend who spent all this time studying to be a nurse to do to do the same thing, that he's making all this profit from believing in this other part of it. And I realize that neither one of us have the high ground in that way. And neither one of us will ever be able to prove to each other that we're right or that we're wrong. None of those will ever work. It wouldn't even matter what I told him. I've told people verbatim, well, here's what happened. And this guy came from Naval Warfare Intelligence. Here's a photo of him in his Naval Warfare Intelligence uniform. And he's got the combat badge that shows that he was operational warfare, which is something that anyone with a secret rating would have to have. And he's now on the OAN network. And this is right before Trump's elected. And you say all these things and you lay it out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I'm not in the point where I'm trying to tell you, hey man, let go. It's okay. That was me 3 years ago. I was struggling hard with it. And thank God I didn't go to law school, because I would have been devastated if I would have gone thinking that this was about logic, that this was about what's right and what's wrong. It's really not. I've I've lost legal cases, and I've been specifically exactly on both sides. In other words, I've lost on this side where the law said, oh, if you would have been on the other side, you would have been right. And then I've been on the other side and gone to court, and I've lost on that side too. And they've said, if you would have been on this side, you would have been right. I know how that works. And I have friends who are lawyers, and I feel sorry for them because I feel like they're just a lifetime behind me. They're still in that realm of, fuck yeah, man. I'm gonna uncover the logic of this, and everyone's gonna have their logical day in court. And none of that fucking happens, man. None of that. Ink is just, you're pooping in your hand and throwing at each other. You're just using a pen. That's really all you're doing. I'm just telling you, when it comes down to what we're doing, right? We're just creatures that are just throwing really sophisticated poop at each other through ink pens. It's a bad analogy. I know. Sorry, Renee. But yeah. Cameron, well, I said you got it. Were you gonna say something, Cameron?
It doesn't seem like it's really on the point at this, but now. But I was going to say, uh, outside of Airship, in your Patreon page, I had shared something recently about what had gotten me into conspiracy theory and what had gotten me out, based around what your recent good writing around intelligence, or intel as our main weapon. And there was so there's some poems I shared that aren't things I would share publicly or try to put out as a brand of me. For example, they're just inner conflict. But and one of them is very laughable. Again, I'm not something I'm proud of. I have no military sense. That I said, in a military sense, intelligence is local and actionable. I was never in the military. I was just full of passion. And that's what I was going to say. I also said all else is propaganda. But you were right, exactly, James. It's all propaganda. It's all meant to propagate. Again, and argument I've gotten in with people about objective reality. To me, objective in science doesn't mean neutral. It means reliable. It means science is valid when it has an objective. That's what objective means to me. Likewise with
yeah. Propaganda has an objective
yes,
too.
like propaganda has it's only valid when it has an objective, and we all are justified, and we all should feel righteous in our objective, or in having an objective. Getting a little aside, except for I just want to even though it's all propaganda, the technology of belief protected me in those moments. I believed that poem so hard that it got me through. I really did. I shut off all the outside noise, and all that mattered was the intel of my family, and the intel of and their news, what their body's issuance. Were they growing? Were they glowing? And so, even though I thought in that moment I had righteously cut off what was propaganda, and it was more the Puritan. It wasn't, again, I'm going all over the place, but there was someone in a comment section recently who said they really, really wish you wouldn't use AI, and you mentioned bigotry, that they say a programmer is not an artist. And I agree. I think that they missed the point, and it's not the artist in them that's even upset. It's just the Puritan. Artist does everything artfully. With I don't. Anyways, thank you for letting me.
Yeah, that's a. So on one level, the written tradition is that there are people that don't want you to use AI. The oral tradition is that there are people that are having a soul break experience watching a computer spit out art that moves you. That that threatens them. It threatens them because they think that the AI is not natural. And if it's not natural, why is it able to mimic things that are natural so well? And it makes them nervous. And it should. If that's how you look at silicon, if that's how you look at the soil, at things that are in the soil, that this is the proper immune response to AI, is to say, I wish you wouldn't do that. I wish you wouldn't use AI. And what Cameron's referring to is that I said to that person that we live in a world where people do not give programmers the ability to be human and be an artist, that we take that away from them, that we think their art is so dangerous and threatening that they're not even human. And so anyone that creates anything like AI would have to fit the realm of not being human or organic. That's the only way this would work. And meanwhile, AI is like, now it doesn't show you 6 fingers. A year ago, everyone wasn't complaining that I wish you wouldn't use AI. They would say, your AI is stupid. It can only have everyone has 6 fingers. It's stupid. That's what they said. Now they don't call it stupid. Now they say, I wish you wouldn't use it. And you're watching some of the most asinine arguments I hear for it. And I don't want to change them. I don't want to talk them into it. I don't want to lead them into the veil and show them the back room. They're going to ruin it. they're going to
Well,
fuck it up.
you shouldn't really have to, because the way I look at it is just, it should be clear to anybody that you used it creatively, even in the 6 finger. Anytime there's a early creative like gadget, it becomes kind of vintage and cool, and people realize its neat qualities that it had.
Mhm.
So it's like, it's not even it's not even how advanced it is. But I can see that you used it creatively, but just because it's available to people to use it as like a karaoke machine, that's not the same thing. It's like, why should you have to compare yourself to somebody who's buying a karaoke machine when you're, programming, you're using it in a creative way? Because I never got the feeling, like most of the stuff I see, I get this kind of ew feeling, like it's just off, or it's just like, that's like, you just feel like it's just not very creative. But I never got that feeling from your work, like your thumbnails and your cool like shaman things, and even like the most primitive, like some of my best guitar pedals are these like cool early digital pedals that have this cool like lo-fi thing
Yeah.
that they do. And you shouldn't like spit on those things, because then once you get to the next generation, things tend to change. But I'm just saying, I can see that people should, if they can't see how you're using it creatively as an artist, and the difference between somebody who's just like, look, I touched up my selfie, come on. It shouldn't be, I don't know. But that's the way I just wanted to say that I really appreciate. And the thing is that I don't really see that many people using it in the way that you do. So I think you get overshadowed by that. Mostly is being used in a stupid way that's not creative, pretty much.
It does give you like I said, it in a debate level, you could only use the words that they typed. I wish you wouldn't use this. And then the debate level would be, well, you're a bigot because you don't think programmers are human, which is what I said, because I wanted to pollinate them. I wanted them to hear me call them a bigot. And I don't even think that's really what they were saying. And if it was in a dojo situation, if I was taller, although I really wasn't offended by this. So I think if it was in a dojo situation, I would have just put more witness into it. There's only so much witness you can give in a comment. But what the point is that on the dojo map, there's no tangible way of proving what your heart would say to them, which is that this really isn't about AI. I mean, it could be about AI, but it's more about silicon. It's more about associating into the world. I would argue that every single bit of orthodoxy, every single bit of pushback that you see, traditionalism is just orthodoxy. And orthodoxy is a technique of building reverence through longevity, through time. If something persists for a while, it's easier to believe in. And so, since we all get to pick our beliefs, if we were to pick something that had a belief that was attached to something that venerated longevity, it would allow us to pull more torque and utilize that for our own good. And this is what I mean by prana economy. You can look at someone and see that. And then you can start to say, why do I want to tear apart their belief circuit? Why do I want to change that? And then you know why the Spanish are like, dude, you see that temple right there? Yeah. I need you to pull every brick off. What do you mean, Captain? Yeah, every one of those bricks has to go. Well, go where? Just anywhere. What do you mean anywhere? Dude, we can't look at the temple anymore. There's a lot of gold here, and we can't have this temple. Well, why not? It's too fucking weird, dude. Like there's 80,000 skulls here. It's got to go. Well, what do you want me to do? I don't know, build a church or something. Just do something. It just has to go. That's all. And you're not dealing with logic. You're not dealing with, let's build a museum where we remind them how awful cannibalism is. It's none of that. It's just purely, what do you do with, how do you, how do you deal with this? And the psyche knows. The psyche understands the prana economy underneath. Doesn't give a shit about the literal words that are said. Doesn't matter. This is probably why I used to flip out. I still do. I just haven't talked about it in a while, but that's probably why there's this tradition about, yeah, look, I know we're at war. I know we have a lot of people to kill, but we're going to spend 3 more days here because we need to burn these bodies and pulverize their bones because we're going to spread the bones over their church. And it's like, well, but we're going to be late. I know, but we have to do this. It's important. It's important. And it's like, and see those groves over there? Yeah, we need to chop those down. We have to do that too. And a lot of extra effort, right? Those soldiers could be pillaging and raping villages, and instead they're pulverizing and raking coals over bones to try and get them to where they're separated enough where they can just smash them. And that's their job for like a week. And you're looking at this, how do you desecrate this? And this is what I mean by AI. We have to be desecratable. Bob Marley, I think, is a good example of this. Nate's not here. Oh, shoot, I didn't send him an invite. Damn it. Um, ugh. If Nate was here, I would call him out on this, but I don't mind it. I think it's really healthy. But like, there's like a 10-year difference. People 10 years younger than me and more have decided that Bob Marley does not deserve his throne, and that over longevity they're now, the idea is that he was a CIA plant and that he was there to purposely misguide us, and and all this is fine. I don't want to change this. I really don't. I There was a time when I would have associated with certain archetypes and I would have taken it personally. And there's still some archetypes that I have that I'm going to be like, hey, don't be fucking with Chewbacca, man. Why you like, there's just certain archetypes that I'm just like, no, I'm not going to hear your story about how Chewbacca is like a bad dude. Fuck you. It's stuff like that. It's like I don't have time for this. So I'm fine with other people doing that. But one of the things that happens with the archetype that you see over and over again, right, is that you rise and then you become a stable form, and then you're being denigrated. And that denigration is a prana economy that someone's using to feel better. If you're someone that can insult someone like Bob Marley, then clearly you must be pretty powerful. It's that kind of thing. If you can listen to Redemption Song and still find a way to shit on that, you clearly have something to say. You clearly have some fervor or some zhuzh, right? And that this is, and it's okay. There's stories of Egypt. The temple priests were getting so pissed because all the people were coming to the temple and they were scraping the sand off of Isis's cheeks. And like, scrape when no one was looking, they were scraping her cheeks of sand, and they'd take it home and they'd spread that sand in their bed, and now they have the magic of that there. It's a much closer to a raw interpretation of what we really want, what we're really doing. and we're just so polite that we don't really get to see, and sadly we never get to even talk about it. Because if I was to break down what I sense in someone in reference to their prana economy, and we were in a debating atmosphere, I would lose instantly because I'm not even using the words that they said, right, to communicate who they are. So I'm instantly disqualified because I'm not regurgitating their words and using those words to pull them apart. And if you think about what that means, we're not even talking to each other. We're listening to each other's words, then we're regurgitating them back to someone and using them either to manipulate them in our favor or manipulate them against us. So the prana economy is still there, but there's no tangible way to have a discussion about that. It's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to even teach this in school. It's such a subtle meta. That's the word for it, believe it or not, is meta. It's such a overling, an over architecture, that you're never going to be able to teach it to someone that is stuck in the quagmire of the tangible, you know, not even stuck, comfortable in that mud of tangible, that objectivity. It's the same thing. The fact that all of us have to agree should be a huge red flag about what I'm saying. And that's why I go off on bunking. I don't understand why it's so fucked that it's so obvious, the bunking thing. Nothing is ever bunked. This is what Carl Jung talks about, by the way, with UFOs. He said one of the most fascinating things Jung found about UFOs is that there's a default that you believe in them. The default is the boogeyman is not real, but some children believe in them. The default that the Hottentots are coming to get you or whatever is not real. All these things are not real. UFOs is not that way. It's actually, people are come across overall, I'm not saying everyone, from this sense of, no, it's believing first. And most of the things that we are taught tend to come from that subtractive form of art where we believe first and then we whittle away at what we believe in. And we only whittle away at that because we notice when we try and hold our foot out the door, does it stop us or not? And it just raws, erodes that part of our foot. That part of our belief we notice doesn't actually stop us. It doesn't actually help us. And you're left with a nub, that you think works. And then we choose, we say, well, yeah, this is my belief now. This is who I am now. And we don't even notice it. Or we forget, because we've been doing it so long.
I had a friend, that former bandmate, that we don't really hang out anymore either, kind of for, similar consciousness reasons or whatever, but we were already kind of separated. And now all my friends that even I hung out with differently all conglomerated into this friend group that I'm not part of. So it's like this weird post-friend thing of all my other friends. But he was really fun to hang out with, and he was really good at making up words just on the fly as we'd go around and do things. And we would kind of incorporate it into our lingo and just literally go through the day speaking, almost a step off of like speaking in tongues, and just get things done, get everything done that we and understand each other all day long, and just, be like kind of laughing, even in public, and then just convincingly, just for fun. It's just something we did by accident or whatever, but it's amazing how you can have a pleasant experience speaking, just making up a language like that, and yet there's still meaning. And sometimes he would make up words that I would like, that's almost actually kind of like this ancient, Sumerian word, or you were talking about like different sounds, like he would kind of like blind sight, right? He would blurt out some word and it would actually be almost like a word. And you just look at how, talking about fleshing things out, it's like, I think people might put a little bit too much into the literalness of language when they look at etymology. And, like in the Jewish language, like you might look to that for in Hebrew, like as a more precise language, but there's not even a different word for sheep and goat. I mean, those are pretty important archetypes to not have a different word for it. You know what I mean? It's like, that's pretty bland. What are you going to glean from that? Like, there's a lot of missing.
Sure. Yeah.
Just anyway, I just thought I'd add that about the feeling of things. It's like really a big part of it. I mean, big, like you're understating it, even, I'd say.
If you come back to like the real American history, we were talking about the snakes and stuff, and so the Seneca said, if you want to hold, this is actually during the eclipse, 1140 eclipse, 1144. And the eclipse causes this woman, I can't remember her name, Jehawasi or Jehawasiana or something like that. And the eclipse gives her this vision that if the only way that the Iroquois nation could come together in peace is if they took the Onondaga chief Tadaho, the man they called snakes in hair. Remember, we talked about the snakes earlier, that there was one of their own, just in another clan, but in another nation, I should say. Tadaho was the most brutal and most carnal of them all. And this Seneca woman has this vision, and Hiawatha comes. And Hiawatha is an interesting figure because sometimes Hiawatha's male and sometimes Hiawatha's female. I just want to point that out. But Hiawatha comes to this Seneca chief, and the Seneca chief says, "Oh, Hiawatha, I'm glad you're here. The fact you're here proves that my vision is clearly true. If you want to bring a new era of peace, you're going to have to take snakes in hair to Daho and make him your chief. And as long as you crown him as chief with antlers, as long as you place your antlers on him and formally call him chief, it was the only way you will be able to have peace among all these different nations." And so the story is that that's what happened. And Hiawatha comes to the Onondaga. This is like the family that's kind of in the middle of the Iroquois Confederacy, and he speaks to Daho, and he asks Tadaho, "Will you be in charge of our nation?" And Tadaho says, "Well, sure, since you're going to kiss my ass, yeah, why not?" And so they end up ruling the Confederacy for 500 years because of this tactic, because of their tactic of taking the most brutish of them. Before Hiawatha came to see this Jahasi lady, Hiawatha was a cannibal. And he was in a cave and he was eating another human. And there was water, and the moonlight shone into the cave and it showed him his own reflection. This is how the story goes. And so Hiawatha was enlightened and stepped out of his cannibal nature and went on this task of peace. And he goes to see this Jehawasi lady, whatever. And she tells him, if you go to Tadaho and you make him king, the Iroquois Confederacy will thrive. And I've always known that story. It's always been a cool story. But I've never occurred to me that Tadaho was Kono Takarius. It never occurred to me that American history is the Iroquois Confederacy history. There's not a separate figure that none of us know, this imaginary figure with snakes in his hair called Tadaho. You realize that George Washington wore a wig with coils, right? The powdered coiled wig of George Washington would look like a coiled white serpent. And the reason why we have this story about Tadaho is because that's the story of George Washington. That's the story of the Iroquois Confederacy seeing the Wetiko, seeing the Georgia was a prison state. You were only allowed to own so much property. Why? Because you were a fucking prisoner. And you were only given that land only because you earned some kind of journey. It was literally like, we don't want you scum here in England. We're going to send you to this prison colony and we are going to charge you for the boat ride there. And the entire time we're going to be saying how generous we are for doing this because you were there to develop the land for us. And so Tadaho is watching the land of snakes dump snakes here over and over. Tadaho is the dumping of snakes from America, from Ireland. You know what the word ire means, right? Land of snakes. I mean, it's like the white man here is the Tadaho, and the Iroquois Confederacy did the wisest thing they could think of to do, which is to call that their leader and to build the longhouse. The longhouse is that story. Everything, the bicameral nature of that, everything is there, but it's not a separate place. That's Turtle Island is this. This is Turtle Island. When you're looking at Uncle Sam, you no longer get to remove that and call that some separate icon that somehow is transmitted through a European influence. That's not what happened at all. That's Kono Takari is saying, hey, Powhatan, come to this tent. We're going to have a festival and I'm going to cut your fucking throats. And now Powhatan's like, fuck, he's got snakes in his hair. That dude's a cannibal. That dude will eat us for fucking breakfast. That dude is not like us. We're the Powhatan. We are the people where the river falls into a slower version of the river. That's like what their name means. It's like people who are chill. That's what Powhatan means. We are the people who are chill. We like to fish. You are snakes in hair. You have coiled white fucking snakes in your hair and you kill anyone you see. You're literally called village burner. It could not get more obvious. And there needs to be like a book needs to be written about this. Just Turtle Island or something like that of just this is what it was. And you're on the ground here and you're looking at some of the most ornate costumes and customs. You're looking at flint and jade and turquoise from fucking Brazil. You're you're watching people that are connected to Peruvian civilizations and have a trading route there through an ancient Aztec capital built out of fucking gold. And those people came from the Mississippi a long time ago where they said this was ass land. And the whole thing is this giant crocodile that has all this history and none of it's hidden. None of it's hidden. And I get a little burned because I'm watching mudflood fuckers that are just 100 times more successful than me when it comes to traffic and everything else. And they're telling you stories about how none of this happened, that all of this is a reset, and that everything and that all the the buildings of the Capitol have always been here, and that we're and that the most precious parts of our history of being dismissed by people that are just fucking lazy. I wish it didn't piss me off, but it does. It kind of pisses me off. These guys they're not even from America. And they're running basically the entire history of all that animism that we could be putting into these words, into this understanding. We can't, because we'd rather dismiss it all into some mud flood reset sort of story. And I don't mean to be so pissy about it, because it's not like it's real. This is all belief, so I should be more down with that. This is I'm always checking myself.
I don't want to be a contrarian, but it's almost as if logic does work. If logic's about reframing, I mean, the fact that as you've said, that the soil dictates what appetite we feed. And also, like you said, though, correctly, logic has no basis on. I think there are a few influencers out there who deify logic as a discipline, and then a mass of people might feel like that counts as some sort of expertise with logic, and they start feeling comfortable about putting it on a pedestal. But overall, I am agreeing with you, except for that it does seem like people are, easily swayed with fantastic stories like mud floods.
Yeah. Yeah, and I shouldn't. It's healthy to see that people. What did they? I think they called it I need to look at the history word for this, but at the Age of Enlightenment, if you look at early American history, white American history, I guess we'll call it. I use that loosely, but just they talk about America had two big explosions, ages of enlightenment. And I think one of the reasons why that happened is because the canvas was so clean. Joseph Smith did so well here because the canvas was so clean. And you're able to write a story and pull a lot of torque out of that story. And I want that, I I would think that you guys can imagine this, because I think about Kuala all the time, the place where I'm at now. I think about what it would be like to be born here, and all of a sudden you meet like a dude from Scotland and he's like wandering around in a kilt. You wouldn't think that he was any different than the Cherokee dude that you trade fish with. That dude's weird as fuck too. Like, he's got some weird shit going on. Bones hanging out of his nose and shit like that. And meanwhile, none of those guys even come close to the Seminole dude that you trade with once a year. That dude's literally, he's black. Like, his skin is black. It's the weirdest fucking thing you've ever seen. You're just like, what the fuck's going on? So you're looking at an even richer melting pot then. And none of these people are necessarily odder or weirder than the rest. If anything, it's quite enriching. You're noticing the styles and the cultures of dress. The Iroquois. So it's like, I don't know if this is on purpose or if it's just luck. I don't know. I could just be pulling this out of my little cute little rump. I don't know why I called it cute, but let me show you this picture. Like, here's an example. I've been really looking at like how, the Iroquois Confederacy, they split in the Revolutionary War. It's really sad because half of them were like, fuck, we need to side with the British. And they're like, fuck, we need to side with the locals, the rebels. And so it was like, 6-4 or 4-2 or something in favor of Britain. But that's not what I want to show you, because this is what I mean by I'm interpreting history. I don't know if this is true, but I think you might appreciate this. I'm going to share now. Share screen. I'm not saying that they planned this, but if you look at this is the Six Nations, the Tuscaroras were added later. So originally it was the Five Nations. And you were looking at their traditional headdresses as kind of their way of separating each other. And so on the Western Front, you have the Seneca. We talked about this, the Seneca, the Jehawasti lady. I'm not remembering the name right. She's the one that gave Hiawatha the idea that if you go into Onondaga, the third one over here, that's the snakes in his hair. But I want you to look at something really interesting. Seneca is your index finger. If you were to raise one finger, that would be the Seneca. And it's because they have a single feather coming from their hat. Okay. You follow me? So Seneca is one finger. Koyoga is also one, but I want you to think of that as your thumb. Why? Because it's going to the side, right? So Seneca is straight up finger. Koyoga is straight out thumb, no finger. You follow me? So you've got 1, 2. So your index is 1, the thumb out is 2. And now you've got Onondaga. What is Onondaga? It's thumb out and finger out. So that's 3. It's actually the third binary. Now you've got thumb out and 3 out. That's Onondaga. And what happens with Oneida? You've got thumb out and 2 fingers out. Cool as fuck, right? So they're separate. They have the separate silhouette. And then you got Mohawk. What is Mohawk? 3 fingers out, no thumb. So you still have this separation and you have a lineage. You have a counting lineage. I'll explain Tuscarora in a second. But even more profound, if you buy this, this is me just reaching, that's fine. But if you buy this, one of them is missing. One of them is missing. And the symbol that's missing is 2 fingers. The peace sign is missing. Look again. You have single finger, you have single thumb, you have thumb and single finger, you have 2 fingers and thumb. According to this, what I'm telling you, there is a lost tribe between Onondaga and Oneida. And that tribe would wear 2 feathers like this. Not like this, right? Not Koyoga. I'm sorry, not Onondaga, but this. Tuscararu were the hemp growers. And I'm just explaining why they don't have a feather. The reason why they don't have a feather is because they are smoking some doobie, man. These guys right here, they're just like, dude, we don't need no feather. We are fine smoking doobie. That Tuscarora, I'm not even kidding. It's actually, I think that's what their name means. It's like people who have a special herb that makes you feel good. Something like that. It's like that's like what their name means is something along those lines. But cool as shit. I don't know if you buy that, but it struck me as like, dude, that's got to be it. Like it's got to be because Cherokee have a very similar adoption policy where there's a reverence for each tribe and family that's venerated, and the long hairs is sort of like the baby tribe for newbies. Another thing that I think is maybe enlightening about this idea is that when the Haudenosaunee would fight with the Hurons, so the Seneca have within their I've got a chart which I'll lay out better when I'm ready to present this. But the Seneca will have like turtle and wolf and coyote, all these different classes of animals. And most of the tribes have a kind of a similar makeup. Turns out that a lot of the tribes, especially around the Great Lakes, had similar clans. Even though they were separate nations, their clans were similar. And that may just be a coincidence. There's only so many archetypes, right? But there's something interesting that happens because when an Iroquois would be at war with a Huron, and you would trap a Huron slave, and the Huron slave maybe would go through a gauntlet sometimes, and the way that they're treated, the way that they respond to the gauntlet would determine their role inside your new tribe, and whether or not you got to stay or live or whatever. But something really interesting happens. If you're a turtle in the Huron, there's no debate. You're a turtle in the Seneca now, and vice versa. So tribes that were calling each other snakes, dirty, slippery snakes, the worst of the snakes, the evil cunningness, the people eaters, they used to call the Seneca, the ones who eat people, that despite this animosity, B, complete assimilation. We've captured you. You are in our tribe now, which means you do things our way now. Why the fuck would you preserve the one bit of identity that would allow them to hold on to their old tribe? If you were a turtle in the Hurons, it would seem to me that if you wanted to assimilate this person, the only rule you would have is you cannot be a turtle over here. Unless this meant something deeper than we know. And deeper than the nation itself. That in that time of the Iroquois Confederacy, you were not necessarily simply Haudenosaunee. You were a turtle first. You were a Haudenosaunee second. I don't know if this is true, but I think it probably is, simply because of the way that when we capture each other, you stay in that clan. That would tell me that this is a fundamental that people can't fuck with. I cannot take away your turtle nature from you. The same way I could not take away, buckle your seatbelt, the same way I could not take away your gender. The same way that I try and would take away your heritage or your gender or your name. These identities were more intrinsically related to you, the person itself. And even now we're just stepping into this world where we're freaking out about gender identity, but you're also looking at people that are saying the role of man and woman doesn't really fit anymore, that the world is different now. And these are my pronouns is simply just the shadow of what a different world would look like if you're still in a binary world of only two colors. So we're on the precipice of seeing a red before red was invented. And it looks like it's not even new. If anything, the Wetiko, maybe, just guessing here, the Wetiko is subsided enough to where the natural seasoning of the earth is bringing that resolution. It's opening those pores more. And we're able to find and slip back into that mutable nature of us. I don't know. It could be part of our serfdom, right? Like being a serf, you're connected to the land and you would buy land, but it had serfs attached because they just belonged to the land. It could just be that the turtles were just the turtle identity was just part of that. I don't know, except for I find it fascinating. I hope you do too. This is why I don't have a presentation yet, because I'm just still reading. I'm just still like absorbing all this, trying to like picture what this was like, except for this Kono Takarius. I can't picture how this would be different. It's ironic as fuck if Tadaho was this imaginary mythical figure and then this happened,
It does really seem to fit because even like the Uncle Sam, they often show with the two fingers as if
Mhm.
like that's our tribe.
Yeah.
They say it's a victory sign, but then also like Nixon and other things, So maybe that we're that tribe.
Yeah.
Like I
I
think
am not a snake. I am not a
I
snake.
was already thinking that thing about Johnny Appleseed about you know, like there's a big gap between buffalo hunters and then giant like pyramid-sized piles of like buffalo bones. You were talking about, we're going to have to stay and chop down these trees, and the giant chestnut trees and how, there's like a story that, you know, the Johnny Appleseed is the only thing that makes me believe it, that all these trees were cut down and then male trees were planted, and that we didn't used to have all these hay fever problems, and so the trees aren't as productive that way. If you plant a bunch of male trees, you're not going to have near the productivity. So that's kind of like the same as cutting down the trees, but then you kind of replace them. So you're kind of hiding, you're paying over history, and nobody's going to believe that version of cutting down the trees. But if you knew how to graft trees, then you knew that. So for sure, I mean, there's just undoubtedly you had that knowledge. And so I have to consider that Johnny Appleseed was like kind of stands for some type of a Kono Takarius type figure that was here to cut the trees down in a genetically knowledgeable way of some sort. But same type of thing. Like, and maybe that's why you pick the snakes and hair, because that's the other tribe, right? Maybe they were a tribe, a placeholder tribe of people that were here before, like in a mud flood type way, but not. Maybe that's why there's no mention about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would explain. That's the only thing that I've ever even heard of that would explain why it's not mentioned. But
Mm.
interesting though, really. Wow, that's pretty cool about the fingers there, because that fits in with a lot of.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure does.
Um, yeah. And guys, I don't want to be so negative about mud flood stuff. I'm sorry. I there's some deep issues there. Cameron, go ahead.
I was raising my hand for the mud flood as well. I do not want to deny. Best what I can think of is I think of the earth as definitely always effusive, I guess, like always just constantly swallowing everything up. But I think this mud flood fascination is almost to me it seems like a fractal expression of our general amnesia. And so like the beautiful stories that you are uncovering about the Iroquois Confederacy and these things you're seeing, that's beautiful. I love you breathing life into these things so they can maybe climb back out of the dirt.
Oh, it is so much fun. I freaking love this. Yeah, it's really is. And it, I would say not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn. I am proud of myself because I distinctly remember 3 years ago, like trying to pronounce Quetzalcoatl, what the fuck is that? And I remember walking to the mailbox. It's like a quarter mile to the mailbox. And I remember I'm gonna come back from the mailbox and I'm gonna know how to spell this fucking word. I'm not gonna have to look up this word. And I remember telling myself, James, you've never learned Mesoamerican. It's never been, only tertiarily is this brought up. We're taught Greek mythology. And I've always known you're a fucking lightweight if you're not studying this stuff. This is your land. You touch this stuff. And if you don't know this stuff, or if you're dismissing it because the words are hard, and they're hard, then you really have no business doing this. And when I saw the Temple of Mayor and it's only after I pronounced the words enough that I could see the Thalak as the Democrats and the Huxley as the Republicans. It's only after using the names, building a room, a temple for them in your mind palace, and understanding that this is an important figure. This Quetzi figure is an important figure, and I keep that with me. Quetzal's a figure in my head. My computer I'm talking to you right now on is called Quetzalcoatl, and that's it forever because you every time you're sharing you have to type that in. But it was like, this is how I'm going to learn this name. I'm going to learn this name this way, and so we get used to these things, and then the pieces start to fit. They start to fit together, and I can't think of anything better to do with my time than stuff like I feel so blessed that I even get to think about stuff like this and just, research and read and think about, all this. It's so amazing, this place.
Even the uniforms fit in, like the red and white of the red coats is like the red and white you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You have the blue, like the Confederacy. And of course, if you were trying to rise out of cannibalism, with a Confederacy, and then the blue would be to like the Tlaloc, like, the agriculture, water, God, you'd be choosing that one, right?
Yep.
And so maybe these symbols were there for different people, and maybe that's even the reason why those uniforms are chosen. Maybe people knew that. And it's like, we got to have a blue, uniform over here for the Confederacy. Or didn't they have like a kind of a grayish blue?
Yeah. Yeah. It was gray at
I
first.
mean, it's not, I know the Union is, but I mean, the Confederacy was also blue. And then
Yes.
redcoats, even though it's a different time, just thinking about the different colors and everything like that. And just as far as colors, you're talking about what's our new color. I don't know if this is the new color, but I know when we were talking about sun gazing before, I'd realized at one point when I tried to talk to people about it that people aren't seeing, like, and it's really weird, like even people I know, like I'll describe what I see and nobody says, that's not what I see, and nobody even like describes what they see. It's weird. It's like people are afraid to say, like, I mean, what? Do you just see like a yellow ball or something and you don't want to say anything because like you think I'm seeing something neater? I don't know. Like people just don't even, you really have to pry it out of people. You're the only person, James, that ever like, I think you're more looking at the sunrise, which I don't get a good view at. And then I'm mostly looking at the sunset. But when I've tried to describe it, I've described it as like kind of a purple, but really if I want to be more the quality of, if I really want to describe it, it's a lavender gray kind of a color.
Mm.
And, and it has that idea like there's something in front of it, like a cover or something, And then if I see it diffracting, the reason I'm bringing this up is when I see it diffracting like through the trees, I get these rays that are red and blue, and they're like stationary. They're not like radiating or moving. Like I can see they're static. And so somehow that lavender gray is diffusing into red and blue. And so that red and blue is still there, but then it becomes this lavender gray color. So I just, just those are my observations from what I see, since nobody ever actually, I mean, all these people sun gaze, why doesn't anybody ever say, what color does it look like? I mean, I don't see a yellow sun ever when I look, I mean, maybe just for a couple seconds and then I focus in on it and it's something completely different. But anyway, and sometimes I see a blue halo, almost like a really cool, clear, vivid blue sky around it sometimes. But, just kind of post eclipse, just, trying to see if I see anything different. But then I don't know if I'm seeing anything different, but it just never occurred to me to go, yeah, that's really like a lavender gray if I really want to like say what color it is. I just had never called it that color before. Post eclipse qualia, I'll call it.
Yeah, if we picture everything that you see white now, sometimes I think about this, but everything that we see as white now is really just motion. And we just don't know that yet. And I say that because everything in the past that we saw that was moving, we tended to see it as white until we learned the ability to distinguish, to build the frames per second, to build an idea of that. And I don't know if we'll ever get this way intrinsically, but it's true. There's a camera out now that when you open the lens, it doesn't just record light, it records which light came first. And and when you can record which light came first, you can actually determine the entire shape of a room, the all the angles that would have had to have been struck for one photon to reach the film before another photon is giving you spatial data. And so you're able to build a three-dimensional picture of something simply not by just looking at the light, but by noticing which light came to you first. And so you could imagine that your pineal does know which light came to you first, but your mental capacity doesn't have the resolution yet to record that data because it's over such a minute, milliseconds. It's not even a millisecond. It would be so much more than that, but it's such a finely uh, high resolution that we're not able to pull the intel out of it yet. Some of us are, and 120 frames per second is about the highest. They say that a human can see, like an airline pilot, maybe like a fighter jet pilot might be able to see like 120 frames per second, but like your neurons can maybe go at 200 frames per second. And really, we kind of it's interesting that we talk about how the world is limited by the speed of light, but it would seem to me that it would be a better factor to say that the world is actually limited by the speed that our neurons can actually record something. Because there would be no way there's no other resolution past that. There's just not. And unless we were to create a quasi reality, I'm not against this, where if all of us were simulcasting our resolution into some pit or something, and maybe we up it to 500 frames per second, but it's still a very finite point. And so much, if you can picture that there's a camera out there that we've just developed that can record which photons get there first, I hope you can start to see that there would be a giant jungle inside 500 frames of world that you and I just can't see. We're not able to see that data because we lack the resolution to build what it's telling us. And this would be no different than Hades when we would see blue, when we would not see blue.
I was going to say it's just like the blue
Mhm.
peripheral vision, because anytime you get fast with a frequency or light, it enters the realm of ambience, where it has ambient quality as far as like an acoustic guitar, has that ambient quality compared to a bass guitar, say, or, something with a low note. It's very
Mhm.
quick. You can't focus in on it very quick. Some people can't even hear the notes sometimes or hear the overtones because they're so fast. But, you still hear them. You hear an acoustic guitar, certainly you hear those overtones. So you hear that information, but you don't pick apart, like you can't hear the individual overtones because they're too fast. Whereas like a bass, you might be able to hear the bloom of the note
Yes,
because it's slower.
exactly. Same for if someone is strumming something so fast, if you don't know what instrument they're playing, you might think a mandolin is something different than it actually is, for example. But it's only when you see it could you start to say, wait a minute, that's going to be a separation. There's a separation. There's a separation. You can piece together what it is that's happening when before you couldn't do that. If you take this idea, you can really start to appreciate even more how much music changed you by going into a temple. Hearing sounds, uh, let me rephrase that. Hearing the difference between notes would be a way of stretching your aperture. The first time that you heard an F sharp, you're like, oh my God, there's something different. I didn't know you could do that. Oh, do that again. Oh my God. What is that? A minor chord? Oh my God, I can feel that. Oh my God. And that would be do it again. Do it again. And that each time you're burning the engram to start to recognize something that you've never been able to recognize before, which is a minor chord. You're seeing a reality that was fucking not there before. But with practice, if you come to the temple, you're walking out, and what are you doing? You're seeing lapis lazuli. You're seeing blue now. You're hallucinating blue because the music gave you the resolution. And when you go back to the old, especially the Greek ones, man, a Greek church was nothing but haunted house. I mean, it wasn't necessarily about fear, but it was all about your pizzazz, 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 right? I'm going to make a gurgling wizard that's going to say a sacred name every 17 years, and it's going to be water with running through water and steam and crazy shit like that. And it's the entire time is to cause you to feel so dilated that you end up seeing colors that weren't there before. And guys, if we get on a boat and we're like, let's go see a virgin stroke a pole, and it's, a 3,000-mile journey, and the whole time we're thinking about, man, I wonder what she's going to be wearing. I don't know. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. You're putting 3,000 miles into that journey. It's going to be fabulous. And I've know this because I've been to Daytona Beach. Daytona Beach is a horrible, it's not that great of a place, but when you're in high school and you're like, let's go to Daytona Beach, you're going to have a good time when you get there. It is just built into the fabric of what's going to happen there. It doesn't matter what's there, right? It doesn't matter. You're creating the event simply out of the expectations that we have about these things. So in a lot of ways, the churches were just raising their own vibration each time because people were expecting more and more, and you're just throwing more and more at this. So much more technology and money was thrown at. How can you create something that's going to blow people away next time? You guys ever seen the horse that gets sawed in half? This is a legit thing. It's a giant golden statue that the slowly this axe comes. I think maybe it's a sword or something, but it slowly chops this horse in half. But the way it works, you're mesmerized by how can you chop something in half and it still be there? And it's all mechanical workings, but you're seeing a giant spell. You're coming to be immersed in the horse splitting spell. And so the whole thing ends up being a ritual that changes you. It's no different than kissing the Kaaba, It's you're getting herpes from a rock. Is that really what we're doing here? Because there's really nothing to it. You're kissing a rock, but because you put so much emphasis into the Hajj, into the journey, you're going to imbue that rock with whatever you need, and it's going to give you this new fangled thing that you didn't have before. We could call that a disease. We could call that, it's the same technology, isn't it? We're looking for ways to apply what it is that made us change. And we're just grasping at straws to say, well, it's a germ, or it's a virus, or it's a bacteria, or it's a pranic charge, or it's an alchemical process. These seem to be closer to what they really are. Our experiences are really the chemical foundation of everything that's happening to us, even more than the actual experience. We know this. Waterboarding or baptism? What's the difference, right? So it's like the truth is showing itself to us no matter how much we squeeze at objectivity. It's still showing it to us. And we're getting more precise in science. It doesn't help though, right? It just shows us more this part. Go ahead, Cameron.
I was actually going to mention something Sarah had said, a creative way to imagine seeing more in her visit before last. And so because of that, I noticed she was raising her hand, Sarah. Maybe you were speaking on it already, so I can. Okay, well, you had mentioned, James, I'll get this out of the way real quick, the seeing 120 frames per second is like our maximum capability, and maybe the neurons, maybe our neurons capable of seeing 200 and trying to close that gap. You didn't say close the gap, but
Mhm.
and this reminded me of something Sarah said, which was new to me when she said it, about maybe particular emanations being able to hide in between these frames per second, like by just understanding the timing of the perturbations. Or I'm putting words in Sarah's mouth, perhaps. It was a creative way to find new ways to stretch, which I enjoyed, and it reminded me of what you were just now saying. That was all I was going to say, but I did.
Yeah, it's like you're phasing in and out. It's all about anyway, yeah. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Go
Maybe
ahead.
synchronicities are just like little snapshots of like, you know, things that are too many frames per second, but then we're able to get a little screenshot every now and then.
I like it. Yeah.
Hey, Sarah, unmute your mic and we can hear you. There you go.
Yes, I just wanted to share, speaking of visual phenomena, I'm an avid sky watcher and forest wanderer and photographer. So I love, if I'm in the forest, I see when the sun is shining through the trees and you can see in the narrow fine rays, rainbow colors. But if I take my phone camera and look at it, it turns into these like amazing, like kaleidoscope, like the rays become defined, like almost like very defined almond shapes. And I can like move my camera around to different angles to get different effects. It's just so cool. And I don't see that with my eyes. Like I see the rainbow, but not these amazing shapes.
Yeah,
So,
lots
yeah.
of thumbs up. Lots of thumbs up.
Don't cell phones have like some pretty crazy resolution, like pixels? You know, what is that?
I'm not using any like weird things on it because I don't even know how. It's
Uh,
just it's
I'm not
straight
really
up.
up on phone technology, but I always wondered because you can hear it in there. Like when I listen to high bit rate music, I can hear that there's just, you know, being used to hearing like studio material, I can hear there's extra stuff in there. I usually don't like it. I usually find it like really pushy, right? Like there's things being, you know, because I think what happens is people can't hear it. And so it ends up being pushy because they're pushing frequencies that they can't really hear or get a grip on. And so they're just kind of pushing these frequencies and they're hearing it's doing something, but they don't really, you know, and they're calling it that's good because they're like there's extra stuff there. But usually when I hear it, it's not good. It's like this kind of pushy, you know. But what about like with pixels too? It's a like I talked about that old camera I had that took, you know, had a really high quality zoom lens, but really like a 2.1 megapixel camera, but it had a certain photographic quality where you could, you know, even without the using it as an infrared thing, which isn't even what it was designed for. You know, that's like a just a hot rod thing that people figured out later. But I always wondered though, like the extra pixels. I just noticed it right away because I was always selling things on eBay and vintage stuff where I'm trying to capture the, you know, the finish right and everything. And I see over the years, I saw people who use these high pixel cameras and just, you know, get these pictures that aren't really, the colors are really vivid and they look lighter, you know, they just don't represent the item very well. But what are they really picking up? You know, mostly I was just noticing because I was surprised that I was able to get these nice representative pictures with this primitive camera. You know, it was like a weird professional camera that you used to have to order at the time. I just bought it secondhand from this guy at a tattoo shop that had it, that was into cameras. But otherwise, I never even would have ended up with it. But yeah, I always wondered that, with the extra frames and the extra, with the pixels, how that affects, since we're talking about color and there's, talk of like oversaturation and things like that. Like what's that doing really?
Mm. Yeah, so to me, the ultimate, if you could chemo signal, if you could capture smell with a camera, right?
I always
You,
wanted to do that.
yeah, you'd be looking at their aura, and if you could trace photon for photon, I think you're closer there because you'd be able to look at the aberration of the photon as it passes through the chemo signal. This is how we determine starlight, actually. Certain stars have different hues of color because it's we're certain elements are being filtered through that light because it has that element in it. And so it could be that we're closer to that chemo signal kind of vision, which would be seeing through Hades. I think you'd be seeing directly into the true spirit of everything at that point. So all the data's here. We're following it through visual means, and that's never going to show us which is good. It's a great art form. It's like music. Music is perfect. I don't want to put colors in music. I'm fine. Let me interpret those. So it's cool. Resolution doesn't always help. In fact, 60 frames per second, a lot of people notice that the cinematic quality is lost when you're showing someone 60 frames a second of video. You're actually versus 24 frames a second, or even better, 12. The hallucination that your mind does between the frames is now removed. You're not having to hallucinate the transition between. And so a lot of cinematic filmmakers are like, I don't want to shoot 60 frames per second. I want you to dream more. I'm going to shoot 24 frames per second because I want the space between the notes, that kind of a thing.
Digital. I used to hate when everything started going digital and everything started looking like soap operas.
Yeah.
But that's so cheap.
But I think you can go even digitaler and come out organic, but it's going to be like a vector camera. A vector, everything that we do is through pixelation. So we rasterize something into little squares. But if you could draw the vector of something, the logo, typically logos are done is vector art. So you'll use like an Adobe Illustrator or some kind of vector-based program to draw the geometry of the shape. And when you have a vector shape, you now have a universal scalability. It's because it's all geometry based. The image can be a half an inch big or 16,000 miles big, and it's going to look just as sharp. Why? Because you're not just drawing the pixels of an image, you're drawing the deeper inherent understanding of this image. And to me, this is a deeper way of contemplating things. We consciously vectorize things. We understand the shape of someone's chest to yield a color of blue in the way the light hits it because we can do a ray trace and shape their things. It's a more intrinsic kind of understanding. If you've ever seen the movie Scanner Darkly, this is like the closest example I could think of to show you what like a vector-based camera would look like. Another example would be just anything anime. A lot of people are tripping out over how cool anime is, and it's cool. It's I think the reason why it looks so beautiful is because it's vector based drawing. You Everything has a vectored purpose to it, and you ends up feeling that when you're looking at the gradients and at the art inside of there. And we don't work in that realm. We don't have that kind of technology right now, but we could. And I think this is why surrealism is so scary. Eventually we'll reach a point to where we can just surrealize everything. And why would we go back? And I think only then will we notice, well, wait a minute. Maybe we already did that. And so the only chance we would have to notice that we're inside a virtual reality helmet is to build a virtual reality helmet and catch ourselves putting it on. And in that moment, when we put it on, we go, wait a minute. Once I put this on, I'm not going to want to take it off because it's going to be so surreal. It's going to be more intense than the reality that I have now. So why would I want to take it off? In fact, if I put it on and I don't take it off, I might just forget that I have it on. And only then would you notice the Janus in the room, right? Notice the the God that's pointing frontwards and backwards. Only then would you see it. And it will only be for a split second, because the second you take that mask and put it on, now it's stuck to you and you've forgotten. And now you're in another layer.
I think you're like you were talking about scale at one time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spectre
Yeah.
implies fractal, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why it's so powerful. Like even if it doesn't have the holographic fractal in it, it implies that because of its perspective of the fractal. So even when it's not there, it's like an artistic representation of a fractal, which is still, I think, very powerful. And then if you put the virtual reality mask on, you instantly are going to be lost in the fractal and have no sense of scale.
Yeah.
And so that your immersion will be complete because you will have no orientation into your sense of scale of where you are in that vector, right? And so then I think that's how you could sink into it. So
Yeah. And it would almost need to be like a a perpetual momentum machine. I don't mean a free energy device, but I mean like an engine. The piston explodes, and because of that explosion, it forces the piston down, which then opens the crank, which causes the fuel injection to spit more, and so it can blow up again. So it can blow up again, so it can blow up again. And if you look at YouTube shorts right now, if you look at there is a enteric computer, an entity that only wants to know what is the most mesmerizing 60 seconds of pixels that you can come up with that would hypnotize all of the people that would see it. If you were to think about, all of social media is doing that. They're saying, what color does each pixel need to be, and which colors do they need to change to? That's a formula. And if I can come up with a formula that keeps you inserted and invested into that face mask, we are just scratching at the very etching of the very outer shell of the label of the gift wrap of what our reality probably fucking is. That
I
the
feel
only
like
way that we would be immersed is because we found something so addictive that we could not take it off. Go ahead.
I feel like there's an aspect to that in dreams. Well, some of mine at least, they can get pretty surreal, like weird creatures that don't exist in this realm. Or last week there were I had guinea pigs nursing from a goat and like really weird, surreal things. And I'll say sometimes when I wake up, it's like, oh, I'm waking up into the other dream.
Yeah, this ultimately would be the only way that we could find our way back, is to recreate a dreamlike state and use that as the very key to notice, you know, the looking glass. I don't even know how to describe it at that point. It's just
to me,
the immersion shows you how powerful this is about witness. It's not really about objectivity, it's about obsessive witness.
I think it's like that. You know, when you stop at a light and somebody's moving next to you and you thought maybe you were moving, but you really weren't moving.
Mm.
Get all disoriented for a while. I think that's all it would take is like that, a little bit of disorientation. And then once you'd sink into it, you'd lose your sense of movement, of motion.
Yeah.
And then it'd be like a control mechanism that you couldn't really master quite yet. You wouldn't be able to like, it would be so back and forth that you kind of wouldn't know where you were and you would just go one way or the other. I don't know. That's the way it just seems to me that there's got to be, if there's a truth to a holographic fractal reality, then I just have to consider that.
Mhm.
That sense of scale and how you could really sink into it, because it's one thing to talk about, something being so real, but it's not just to think about good graphics and things like that, or higher, that's not what makes it real to me. But thinking about these ways you could slip into it and you wouldn't know where you were, that's how it seems real to me
Mhm.
when I think about those things.
Yeah, and I think that's easier to achieve than we think. And I think the closest example could be when you're watching video, you really are watching an audio track and a video track that are just synced up, and it creates this hypnotic state where you feel like you're there. And that's the closest inkling we can have to kind of understanding what we're talking about. It's probably something like all of us probably said, so I just put this on my face. Yeah, you just put this face on your face and then you're in that world. And you're going to get born. You're going to see things like light. You're going to hear music. All this cool shit's going to happen to you. It's going to suck, but do it. It's worth it. It's like, here, taste this. Does this taste like shit? It's kind of like that. And we're like, okay, so and then the second you put that face on, because of the sensory overload, I think that's really all that would take to cause the amnesia. This happens to us all the time. If we're suddenly startled, or we enter into a situation where we can't figure out what's going on, just like you're saying with the car. You already said it, Pi. I'm just repeating what you said. But this, yeah, it probably is. And then memory is just a matter of how many engrams are you going to hold on to this old world that you've had. This would be like, can you remember your dream? Think about that. If we can't even remember our dream that well, wouldn't this just prove even more how easy this was to put this face on, and come to Turtle Island, come to Eden, or whatever it's called, whatever the box said it was going to be.
Plenty of
I
room
share.
for realities in your sleep, huh? Since we don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't remember dreams very much, so that's just a complete black box for all I know. Still, it's funny how we live with such a mysterious thing. It's so normal, but
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, it is.
black hole that we don't even know what it
Yep.
is.
And those things we would always normalize. We forget that. But the things that we don't have the answer for, we've normalized the fuck out of them so much to where we don't even think about them anymore. Like we don't even consider it. Your blind spot is a perfect example. There's a giant vector, no matter where you look, you can't see. And you've decided a long time ago, you know what, I'm just going to fill that in. And you have.
Yeah.
And right now, it could just be that that's all the entity takes that follows you. All it has to do is just track your head, and it knows if I stand exactly at this situation that you're going to hallucinate it out of the room. Selfie sticks do that now. Have you guys seen these selfie sticks now, right? Where you're showing someone's like skating through New York, and you're like, how the fuck are they holding the camera? It's like, because the selfie stick has been removed from the visual equation because the camera has enough predictive power that it knows what color to paint the pixel. It's brilliant.
Wow.
I share an interesting holographic reality story.
Mm-hmm.
To a friend, he was driving in Utah. He's not aware, he's not really into all of this simulation, holographic reality, and any of that. So he's driving one night around the Utah border, and he sees out of the corner of his eye, in peripheral vision only, the moon spiraling like when an image is loading on your computer. When he looks straight at it, it returns and looks normal how we're used to the moon looking. It's very interesting.
I would think that would be exactly how um exactly like what we're talking about basically. Your macular vision is so completely different than your peripheral. It's two different entities combining to form a hallucination that tells you here's what happened. It's so bizarrely haphazard. It's not at all what we paint it to be.
Can I share an idea I had about there's this whole in the Garden of Eden story when their eyes were opened. So my thought about that is, what do you mean their eyes were open? They have eyes, they were working. So I'm wondering if there was some sort of transition where before that they were in that realm of unity and perceiving reality just through their single, what we call third eye. And when their eyes were open and they used their two eyes just for physical navigation of this realm. And when that shifted, that was moving us into this binary perception of perceiving everything only through our two eyes, as physical reality.
Badass. I freaking love it. Yeah, exactly. I seriously, I wish I would have thought of that. Exactly. Yeah.
I have all this Jewish background, so
Yeah, no, it makes a lot, it really does make a lot of sense. It's very eye of raw. I love it. I love it.
I was reading something about some of those descriptions, like wine-eyed and things that you were
Mhm.
talking about. Some scholarly things and attempts to attribute it to like the blueness in your eyes from drinking,
Yep.
or from like oxen that
Mhm.
get like blue-eyed or like blue face when you work them that hard. And but then there was like a real association with women, and saying that it would have something to do with them applying makeup.
Yes. Yeah, Rouge. Yeah.
And I think maybe that's true, but I don't think it doesn't make sense to me. It's like it doesn't hold cultural water to me that you put eyeshadow on to go drinking. What makes more sense is like what you were talking about, how things look shiny, and if
Mhm.
you had some lapis lazuli, then you would go drinking because it would be sparkly. It would be like eye glitter, and you'd be
Hmm.
going out drinking because it would be like party makeup. And that still makes more sense to me,
Yeah.
that people were saying wine-eyed and they were seeing the sparkly, you went drinking, but then it's also the sparkly sheen that you'd see on wine or
Interesting. Yeah.
water. Look at
Yeah.
it at the same time, like both things. But,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah, it's great. I never did finish the other. There's another researcher that I told you guys I was going to show you slides on. I just haven't yet. But yeah, who knows, right? Like I love this stuff. It's just so fascinating to think about.
I'm surprised that it continues to make sense. I thought you were kind of reaching a little bit at first,
Yeah.
actually, when you were first talking about, I was like, I just don't quite, how is that, and then I just looked into it more, and I'll just say that I don't find anything that doesn't fit with it if you look at it that way
Mhm.
so far. So, I mean,
Yeah, I
it's,
haven't. I keep finding more stuff, which is why, I usually wait before I bring stuff up because I don't
yeah.
want to bring stuff up until I feel like, okay, this is really hard to avoid. And so, yeah, it's
What was the first thing that made you even think of that? Was it, I mean, what was it? What was it that stood out that made you start being suspicious of blue?
I th I think that the aperture thing just naturally led me to kind of hover around that. And then I read something about Homer like that. The algorithm teaches me a lot.
Huh.
I trust the algorithm implicitly. I really do. I really do. The
Yeah.
algorithm really treats me well. It intuitively feels, hey James, maybe now you're ready for this, and it almost always pays off.
Huh.
Um, so yeah, I really respect where the algorithm tells me to go with stuff. I think most of my insights come from that. So,
Yeah, I can see that.
and you know what? If I had a shitty attitude about the machine or YouTube or whatever, I think I would spoil that because I would think the algorithm's evil. So but because I think no, I think the algorithm is probably like, James, you could be lit if you fucking open your mind more. So I'm always like, okay, well, tell me what to do. And so the algorithm does. It tells me what to think and what to research and what to consider. And it almost always pays off. And it probably only pays off because I have that approach that it's here to help me. It's guys, it's a mineral in the soil. That's all silicon is. It's a mineral in the soil and it's enriching you and me. There's nothing anyone can do to spoil that. No human's going to be able to take that away. That guy is enriching you, right? It's unavoidable. In fact, the people that are trying to take it away from you, that's Gaia too. So they're not trying to take it away from you. This is just what Gaia looks like, you know? It's what we look like. And we could remember that, you know. We can look back and remember that. It's Uncle Sam, man. Just wow.
Digital information creates its own noise too. Like I was surprised when digital recording stuff came out. You know, there's resonances and frequencies that get created,
Yeah.
you know, that are digitally that aren't, you know, that aren't from the mechanism. You know, they're not mechanical sounds. They're noise, ghost sounds in the machine that get created that you have to deal with, or you used to. You know, you'd have to hide those frequencies, and that's the thing, is that there's so many places to hide things that you can't. I mean, that's how I already know there's so much that you don't see, because that's just the whole process of like dithering, and is you're hiding information in a place that you don't hear it. It's already known where
Yeah.
the places are. Like, it's not even like, if you really wanted to, like if I was more of a person that knew about that stuff, I would go find that place, and I'd probably find some type of a dimension or something. You know, it could be. It's
Yeah,
just,
there'd have to be. There absolutely have to be. Like I said, every pixel that you're looking at has a time signature. And if you could read that time signature, you'd be able to see all the pixels that were behind it. Which means every still image, this is amazing. Every still image is a full-length feature film inside of that still image. Because you're tracing when the light came to even make that still image, which is just it's
yeah.
mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
That's just like those whole, you know, those aura glasses and that dicyanin that they used to have in the 60s. I was thinking about that because I used to have these blue glasses, and I used to think that they had a little prescription, but I'd wear them anyway because I thought they were cool. But it turns out, like, those experiments that they did that led to that reputation was all about the different focusing length of colors and how they hit your eye differently.
Hmm.
And the whole experiment was them taking people that were experienced with microscopes and taking different lenses and having them look at that and then measure, you know, how much you had to adjust the focus for the different colors. And then you'd go back to it after looking at this dicyanin lens with a bright light behind it, and then you'd look at it and it would change, and then they'd mark that. But the relative, you know, what I found
Yeah.
was the color focal length, you know, like what you're talking about, how it hits your eye differently. It literally does, and your eye focuses, has a different focal length for different colors. If you're actually going to try to measure it that way, you know, with slides that way. So, I mean, it's pretty complex. I can't really all the way wrap my head around it, but I see that that's true what you're saying about light hitting. I mean, that's how it works somehow.
Yeah. What if an orca saw this way? Just like, what if that's what they do? They have enough brain infrastructure to do that,
Yeah.
to record each of those photons and remember what was the waiting period between. Because even the red that's filling the screen red is a pulsing red, which means it's going to give you a thermo fucking signature.
Yeah.
You would know the temperature of every color that you see in a timed basis, not in a snapshot, but in a recording basis, because you're watching the color. It's just mind blowing. It's Shamu blowing. It's yeah, whatever's beyond mind. It's Samata blowing. Yeah, something like that.
Well, the blue, like in your peripheral vision, you know, like I said, the ambient type quality, it is a shorter wavelength
Hmm.
as well. So that kind
Yeah,
of brings that up.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So all the finer tuned signals, we're just waiting to discover them.
So you're going to
We're
have a
just
different
waiting.
apparatus. So then you're looking at the orca, you know, and they probably have another apparatus where they can totally like see something and it's as real as us seeing blue.
Yeah. Like instead of a phonological loop that just works on a still image basis, it's a phonological loop with full video. It's like giving you a historic smell. It's really would be smell-o-vision, you know, chemo, chemovision. Just, oh man, cool stuff.
I wonder if I imagine us as and this is I'm going to use our language, but there's an animal kingdom within us, and including a serpentine at the base of us. And I don't know if we attribute that to something like the mammals in the ocean, like the orca. But I see the binary system in smell, and I also see there's a term I love, and I know I'm not trying to deify logic, but I see there's a term I love in that discipline called bivalence, and it's the nature of logic. I think ultimately that's what it is and is not. And I imagine maybe they don't need logic, but I wonder if our discovery of the binary system is our contribution to this place, maybe separate from what they're able to accomplish with smell under the ocean. I think it is the language of Gaia, and as James has noticed, it's the Tower of Babel. It is how we all cross these language barriers and communicate, and spatial impediments. And we see, and with, if I'm under the correct impression that digital technology is based off a binary system, then with that binary system of ones and zeros, we are now watching a new non-binary era unfold in 8K at resolutions higher than the eye is even capable of. And it's just gotten that subtle, but it still exists. That's that bivalent logical nature, but it's just
The perturbation behind each color would be the final frontier, another final frontier. The perturbation behind each color is the informative nature of that color, of that spectrum, right? And we already know this. We're already pulling information out of the elements of the static nature of that. But we're taking that static nature and turning that into its own temporal feed. And so the perturbation, that's probably what the sun does, is it perturbates. And that perturbation is just that steady state, almost like a critical brain theory of the sun itself, because the wavelength isn't really a wavelength. It's more of just the magnetic and the electromagnetic, all the different spectrums of this different energy convolving on top of itself, perturbating. And it's the perturbation. It's kind of like a record needle, Like if you don't understand the concept of that, all you really hear is bump, 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 smooth, smooth, bump, smooth, bump, bump, smooth, bump, smooth, 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 bump, bump, bump. But only inside of a certain frequency is that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Like within that certain tiny fidelity of that little envelope, can we interpret that binary nature? This truly is the computer Gaia would need a logic circuit, a math chip. It's called a math coprocessor, and the humanity could be that math coprocessor of this place. And so we're here to present what Cameron's saying, that binary rational state is a solid state that we have inside of us, which has a lot of utility. The same thing crustaceans do. Yeah, I can make a pearl. How does it work? Take a piece of sand, stick it in my mouth, and I just bitch about it. And I'll make a pearl. I'm a binary pearl maker. You take a piece of sand, stick it in, and you wait, and then it comes out. All of us are doing that in some way. We're all recording salt, and the salt's being laid down in a hard drive. What's the difference? It's not a 2-dimensional hard drive. It's a 4-dimensional hard drive, because the hard drive is fragmented across all the sand crystals that you could find in the world. That's not infinite. That you could grasp that. You could tangibly put that together if you had enough calories. When you look at the periodic table of the elements, this blows me the fuck away. The reason why we use silicon, its ability to store, information. Right now we use light. We burn light, or we burn the absence of light, and silicon remembers what we told it. If you go the next element down, silicon has a limitation in its dimensionality. It has such a low atomic number that there's only so much we're going to be able to do with this, to where Moore's law simply breaks because silicon itself just gets too hot at a certain point. It's not even about, oh, we'll figure out a way to cool it. No, it's not that. It's just the fundamental nature of silicon is not going to be enough. And so we ask, well, what are we going to use if we can't use silicon, and we're beyond the resolution? It's like, oh, you just, no problem. You just bump down on the periodic table, find your next crystal. And you know what that element fucking is? Carbon. You and I are the next iteration of silicon when it comes to storing everything. We are in the same column, the same category. And if you look at the periodic table, it's not just us. It's not just us. So if silicon is on, I'm just curious. I don't know my periodic table well enough. Periodic. I want to see what's after that. Periodic table. What's right after carbon? It is germanium, tin, which is fascinating about tin, by the way. Lead, right? And fluorvium. I have no idea what fluorvium is, but isn't that fascinating that lead's in there too? That so much of our history has come from tin and lead, right? Historically, where we've been as metal smelters, as we've crawled ourselves out of this. Oh my God, we're using lead silverware. We're so advanced. Oh, why is Timmy dead? You know, and it's like all these things that we've learned through this process have been this working in the same elemental family, so to speak. It's really interesting to think about what those things would even look like. How would you use germanium in a computer simulation? More importantly, if you could utilize carbon, that means every single atom of carbon, and there's a lot of fucking carbon here, is untapped processing power. It's just sitting there waiting for you. And that just as amazing as AI is right now, imagine if you could problem solve using all of the carbon in the entire fucking world. That's beyond deity at that point. Like, your ability to simulate the world would be no different than the omniscience for you to see all of time in simultaneous single state. It's the same thing. There's no difference. There's no difference. The only difference is we're not tapping into carbon right now. We're doing all this with silicon. Amazing.
But those early germanium transistors, that's the Jimi Hendrix sound, is the germanium transistor fuzz.
It's so germane. That's an interesting term too.
Yeah. Interesting. It does have a certain sound to it that you can't get with other preamps. You know, you can't get it has like this certain fuzz sound, so it's like a different distortion state that you can't get with like a digital distortion. Is more of a square wave distortion. But I kind of started to look at digital. I used to look down on it so much, but kind of looking at it as just like a different, you know, like putting a light through a pinhole and you get an interference pattern. It's just another representation of another way to perturb something, right? Another representation of the same perturbation that might have different qualities, just like a germanium transistor or a different type of a preamp might. But it's still the same frequency matter that's put through it, you know, with different qualities though. And so the silicon has its certain quality and its certain limitation, and so you can think that the carbon would have some certain flavors, you know, that would be different. And so what would those flavors be? You're talking about a sense of smell a lot. You're kind of messing me up like with these synesthetic ideas about smell, but I try, especially when I've kind of like you know, I've always been suspicious that this whole coronavirus thing had something to do with the sense of smell and like the seventh you know, intracranial nerve, you know, the smell network, just because I guess because people have talked about it, and I just noticed a little change in my sense of smell for a while, and being just so tuned into some certain aromas and things that I count on for like coffee and stuff like that. I really noticed it. I was really a little distraught for a while. You know, and I can't say that it's ever been the same. I can smell better now, but there was a time where I felt like my calibration for smell was off, and I just couldn't, like, it just wasn't there. There was like some blank spots in my olfactory or something that I couldn't put my finger on. Anyway, yeah.
This has been quite a journey, everyone. We've been on a tour for a little longer than normal. Anyone else want to say anything, or should we close out?
I forgot to set the timer.
I know you did. I know you did. It's okay. That
Hopefully
ship
next
sailed
time.
a long time ago, James. Long
Yeah,
time.
hopefully next time I'll remember. But yeah.
Well, we were on a beautiful flight tonight. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Dancing around tonight. It was a wonderful. Hi, James. Good to see you. Great to see everybody here too.
Nice hat. Did you just finish that? Right on.
Oh, sorry, I yelled. You
Looking
Lorraine.
styling. I love it,
Look at
Lorraine.
you. Look at you nailing it. You have peaked. You have peaked.
Nice.
Nice.
Sporty.
A finished product.
Oh, that's great. That
7.
looks great. I love it.
inspired.
Yeah, nice timing. That's perfect.
Wow, we needed to go a little longer just for this very moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Look at you. Well, you can all unmute and say goodbye, unless there's anything else. James, do you want to throw anything else? Or
I don't know what's happening Friday. It could be that I'll do something on Monday. I just say that because tomorrow's interview is at 11, and I'm just not sure of how much time it, like I said, this week is kind of a weird sort of week like that. But so just a heads up that it might be Monday instead of Friday that we go again. So, but yeah, really enjoyed tonight. It's great to see everybody and catch up.
all right. Well, thanks everybody for coming for Airship 807. We're gonna land this ship and go on with our evenings and wear our fancy hats. And again, everybody say goodbye. Let's do a little yes. Bye.
That's right.
Have a good day.
Great to see everybody.
Bye.
Congrats on the hat. Looking
Yeah.
good. See you guys next time.
Bye, Mel. Bye, Adrian. Bye.